everyone, welcome to the Innovation Center Fall Speaker Series. And for those of you not familiar with the Innovation Center, we are part of the University of Nevada, Reno. Our mission is to help build a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Northern Nevada and accelerate our innovation-driven economy in our state. You can check out our website to see all the services that we offer to provide entrepreneurs and startups. We have co-working facilities, we have a startup accelerator. But today, we're here to talk about race issues. And all of you have seen recent events unfold, and that has really revealed a lot of the injustice and inequity in our country, and has put race issues front and center. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the economic injustice in particular. And recently, a New York Fed study has just released yesterday, noted that Black-owned businesses have suffered disproportionately during the pandemic, in part due to lack of access to capital, as well as poor access to healthcare. And many of us feel that it is time that we listen and learn and be aware of the race issues in our society, especially those structural issues that create injustice and inequity. We cannot have racial equality without economic equality. And entrepreneurship is often the path to wealth creation and economic opportunity. So we're very honored today to have a panel of entrepreneurs and business leaders in our own Black community in Nevada to discuss race issues related to entrepreneurship and economic opportunity. Just so a few housekeeping, the event will be recorded. The participants' video and audio will be disabled, but we do have a Q&A session at the end. Please submit your questions through the chat, and we will do our best to get your question answered. So without further ado, I'd like to each of the panelists to please take 1 minute to introduce yourself and your organization. And Joe, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining today. My name is Joe Randolph. I'm based in Reno, Nevada. I currently work at Microsoft. I'm director in our America's Operations Business for Services. Been residing in Reno for the past 5 years, coming from Charlotte, North Carolina, and definitely excited to be a part of the panel today.
Thank you, Joe. And Caprice?
Hello, everyone. Thank you also for joining. Thank you to the Innovation Center for having me. My name is Caprice Young. I am the president of the Northern Nevada Black Cultural Awareness Society. I am born and raised in Reno. I'm also the outreach coordinator for the Center for Student Engagement and the co-founder of Shades of Queening Women's Empowerment Group. So thank you.
Thank you, Caprice. Pam?
Well, there we go. Hi, my name is Pam Lovelace. I'm the owner of Pam Lovelace Enterprises, PBA PKL Homes, and PKL Premier Cleaning. I've been in Reno for 25 years, and my company does short-term rentals, workforce essential rentals, and corporate rentals in Reno, Sparks, Carson City, and San Francisco. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be part of the panel today.
Thank you, Pam. And John? John, you're on mute.
You have to unmute me.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John James. I am the CEO of Ignited Results. We are a full-service digital marketing firm headquartered here in Reno. And one of our specialties is we leverage LinkedIn to create business-to-business appointments on behalf of our clients. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm honored to be a part of the panel, and I look forward to participating today.
Great, thank you, John. And by the way, you are a co-host because you're a panelist, so you have full control of your audio and video.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, we have Maisha joining us from Las Vegas. Maisha?
Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. Maisha Williams. I'm the president and managing member of MYS LLC. We are a professional services firm. We specialize in project management, and specifically with diverse populations and diversity programming and consultation. We also have a full graphic design team that specializes in impact graphic design, which means that we use inclusive imagery in all of our design. So outside of that, I also am the vice chair for the Commission on Minority Affairs for the state of Nevada. I am the Nevada Forum Chair for the Women's Business Enterprise Council and have a couple leadership roles within the Urban Chamber here in Las Vegas. So I'm excited to be a part of the panel and a part of the discussion. Thank you for organizing.
Great, thank you. So again, to our audience, if you have any questions, submit through the chat, and we'll try our best to get all your questions answered. So I think I want to start off by maybe asking each of the panelists a question related to their experience. So John, let me start with you. You are the founder of Ignited Results, a successful digital marketing firm. Can you share with us your journey to becoming an entrepreneur? And what were some of the challenges for Black entrepreneurs like yourself?
Sure. So a little bit about my story. I moved to Reno in 2015. That's when we started our firm here in Reno. And when I first got here, I knew one person. And so what we decided to do was we decided the fastest way to get our service to market was to start holding seminars. The challenge was, where do you start when you don't know anyone? So we did what a lot of business owners do. We joined the chamber promoted the event. And on the day of the event, myself and my business development manager, we had 4 people in the room, and so we were a little bit disappointed. We decided 3 weeks later, let's do it again. And the next time around, we actually took to LinkedIn. And we started inviting people one by one who seemed to be suitable targeted prospects for our service. And the long story short is the next event, we had 63 registrations and it was a success. So from there, we started to tinker with LinkedIn for about a year before we rolled it out as a service for our clients. At this point, we've represented clients in over 100 industries. We've crossed the 1 million mark this year, where we have connected them to over 1 million people on LinkedIn to create streams of leads flowing into their business, product demonstrations, etc. From there, I was invited into the Forbes Agency Council, where Forbes invites the top marketers into their council. And that's how I became a Forbes contributor, where on a weekly basis, I'm pretty much writing about anything related to digital marketing. So that's kind of my story and how I came to be before you today.
Great, thank you. Were there any challenges that you face, either because of your race or coming to a community where you don't find a lot of other African Americans and you feel that sense of belonging? And if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, all of the above. So, one of the things that I find common being a Black business owner is, there's always only going to be so many of us in the room. And that's a common thing. There's one guy that I see around town here. We used to always see each other at events, and we would acknowledge each other as the other Black guy in the room. It was our running joke because, on average, we're going to be, maybe 2 to 5% of whoever's in the room. And there are several reasons for that. One of the biggest challenges that I think we face as Black entrepreneurs, depending on what type of industry you're in, for some people, it's the lack of access to capital. If you're in a service-related industry or you're some type of professional consultant, I find that there's a balance between having enough authority to actually be in a position for people to want to do business with you. And at the same time, you have to balance that with not being a threat. So you have to have the authority, but not actually be so threatening that you actually push people away from you. And for example, one of the things that we did in the early days to mitigate that was I would actually position myself as a managing partner instead of the CEO. Because as managing partner, it denotes, oh, there must be other partners. And when we got ready to do bigger deals with larger companies, I can remember on more than one occasion where after all of the due diligence and all the client testimonials, the final question in the boardroom was, oh, by the way, there are other partners, right? You know, and what they're really meaning is, you know, who are the white guys behind you? You know, and if you're just that guy, you can actually, you have the authority, but then it's off balance where you can actually be threatening and make others uncomfortable. And so I find that we often have to play that delicate role and strike that balance between having authority, but also balancing it so that you're not so threatening.
And how did you overcome that? And why do you think that is the case? I mean, do you have to, I mean, there used to be a saying that women have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Now, it's probably true with a lot of minority groups. So how do you overcome that to let people know, hey, you do have the experience, the training, the intellect to actually be in a position of authority?
Right. One of the ways you overcome it is, well, one of the tactics I use, you know, that I shared is being managing partner. And for many small businesses, that's something that you guys can actually use because it's going to give your company a bigger presence, at least perception wise. And at the same time, you're striking that balance. But then there are other things. I'm a big believer in networking and leveraging the proximity effect. And so all of us, be it Black, Brown, Asian, et cetera, you're only going to be as successful as the people that you are in proximity to. And so to the degree that you can actually get yourself next to others who are 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from the people that you need to be in the room with, that's how you get yourself introduced. You know, that's how you start showing up in higher places more often. And so you just have to get in proximity and start networking with those that are within that proximity circle that you desire to be in. Okay,
great, thank you. Maisha, you're also a entrepreneur. You're I believe the co-founder and now managing partner for MYS in Las Vegas. And so what is your experience as an entrepreneur and some of the challenges you face as a Black woman entrepreneur?
Sure. I think for me, I can say that I've experienced some of the traditional challenges, access to capital, access to opportunity. But I've also had the pleasure of creating peer groups where we can talk about what are some of those similarities. So through the Urban Chambers, able to organize a group of high-performing CEOs. All of them are African American, and it was a really healing experience to meet on a regular basis and talk about the things that are ailing us. You're talking about people that have built phenomenal businesses over long periods of time and have quite a bit of success. And it was amazing to hear the recurring themes that we were experiencing throughout that group. Capital is probably the biggest issue facing us, that trying to get traditional funding was nearly impossible, even for folks that had receivables guaranteed from federal agencies. We're still unable to access capital to cover payroll to wait those receivables out. I think that is something that is particularly hard for those in the African American community to obtain. So I've been working with folks in the community to try and solve that issue through different innovative solutions, non-traditional ways of keeping us afloat to make sure that people that deserve to be there have the opportunity to continue.
Well, thank you for those comments. It is well known that Black entrepreneurs often have difficult access to capital. I mean, there's been lots of studies done. 1% of the venture capital actually goes to Black entrepreneurs. And even just with the recent events, what's happening in 2020, the COVID pandemic has really exposed the economic injustice of this country. And if you look at even just the PPP loan, the payroll protection loan, only 20% went to Black communities with Black businesses. And in some really hard-hit areas like Bronx, New York, 7% of the Black-owned businesses there got the PPP loans. So access to capital is a huge issue, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's not just venture capital, but bank loans, lacking that relationship with the banking professionals, not having wealth circulating within the Black community is a huge issue. So thank you for sharing that. And going to Pam. Now, Pam, you are also an owner of your own business, and tell us about your story, your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, I have a little bit of a different journey. I was relocated to Reno, Nevada as a senior mortgage underwriter for a local company. I went on to become a senior loan officer, branch manager, really have a strong background in real estate for 25 years. In 2013, I developed double carpal tunnel. So that was devastating because typing was such a large part of my profession because I traveled and did bulk acquisition underwriting. So when that happened, I went through many years of surgeries and therapies. And then I was determined to be permanently disabled because of the lack of use of my hands. It was very traumatic. The judge actually said to me, "You had such a distinguished career, past tense. Too bad no one will ever want you." And that phrase sat in my spirit for about 6 months. And then I realized, wait a minute, you are the lone diva. You can do whatever you want and no one can tell you you can't. So from that, I decided to create my own corporation and use my knowledge and hire people to act as my hands. So that's how PKL got started. And it has been a real journey to start over at 56 years old. But if anybody can do it, you have the will, you have the way, you make it happen.
That's wonderful. And you know, I think you were faced with multiple hurdles, right? And the fact that you were able to overcome that and provide something that actually Reno really values, our short-term housing solution, is just wonderful. So thank you. Now, if we just pivot a little bit to the corporate world. So Joe, for you, you know, I came from the corporate world, and diversity and inclusion effort has been around for a long time in corporate America. What are the programs and initiatives that you've seen that actually made a positive impact toward racial equality? And what are the areas where are we still struggling and just not moving the needle?
Yeah, I think one of the key areas I think that's worked well is when you look at some of the employee resource network groups that have been established across a lot of different identity groups. And I've experienced this not only with Microsoft, but in other organizations. And part of these groups, they provide a structure to allow these individuals to come together, have a support group to support each other. There's also, in some cases, program that's developed specifically for them to cater to their growth, their development. But then it also helps them get connected to mentors or people that look like them, because I think that's important to help them understand and how they navigate the organization. So I think some of those structures that have been put in place around the employee resource network groups have been key to being able to help some of these identity groups to really understand how they can continue to grow and flourish in the organization. Plus, it's also an opportunity for the companies and those organizations to listen, to learn, to understand what are the things that's coming up for these individuals and how they can continue to help understand the barriers and the obstacles that they face. So I think those have been critical in really being able to create dialogue, drive awareness and understanding, but then also ensure individuals in the ERGs that they have an opportunity to have a support structure, but continue to grow and develop as employees, as individuals as well. And looking at some of the opportunities where I think are still out there, I think is really about how do we continue to drive organic growth. And what I mean by that is you sometimes see this mass hiring or initiatives to change and move the dial relatively quickly. But I think the lack of focus on organic growth, meaning that you're recruiting and hiring in the right places, whether it's to hire more gender diversity, whether it's people of color, et cetera. I think it's important to really understand how we are creating an organization that looks like our customer base that we support. And part of that is how do we continue to focus on organizations that we can partner with to understand where we can bring in diversity, whether it's the Black MBA Association, Prospanica, Power to Fly, which helps us continue to focus on women hiring, people of color. And I think also the partnership with HBCUs and how we can tap into organizations within the university system. So as we bring in younger employees at the junior level, this allows them to grow through the organization as we connect them to mentors, as we connect them to ERGs. This ensures that growth is gradual, but it also allows them to grow in a more organic way. So as they move into more senior levels, we start to see that leadership's landscape start to become a little bit more diverse. And that means we're going to have more diverse voices at the table, which means we have more sustainability as we create a much more inclusive work environment. So I think those are some of the things that I've seen that are working well, but where we can continue to, across the organizations, continue to improve.
Yeah, and I have to say, I must applaud Microsoft for really taking the diversity and inclusion issue to heart. They recently released their 2019 report. They have a lot of metrics. The senior management's bonuses are tied to how well they do in diversity and inclusion. So they're not just giving a lip service. And they recently, and as well as in the past, have appointed minority of different groups as well as women to senior leadership positions. So that's great. So the other question for you is that, you know, technology as well as entrepreneurship could be a path to economic opportunity. So how do we as a community help inspire Black youth to go into STEM related professions and build a tech career and have that economic opportunity?
Great question. I love this topic. I think one of the things we can continue to do and do more of is how do we continue to create more exposure for youth into STEM related programs and understanding what the field is and the different careers that they can choose from if they move into a STEM. As we look at how sometimes we have programs like basketball camps, we have football camps. How do we continue to create more STEM related camps so we can create that awareness and an engagement and exposure at an early age, so as they start to understand the skills, the knowledge, and the types of courses they need to pursue, this allows them to become much more comfortable. It also provides them mentors and people that look like them in these fields, so they can also see themselves in those particular fields and in those careers. And I think as they see more examples of diverse representation, it also increases their interest in STEM related careers and field. I think the other thing that we have to also promote is how do we get their parents involved? As we look at some of the technical skills and as we move and see the shift in digital transformation, and if COVID hasn't done one thing, it has shown us that digital transformation is going to happen a lot sooner than we think. So as we start to see more digital transformation in our companies, a lot of companies are going to be technology companies. So if we can continue to expose their parents to more technology, increasing their skill set, it also creates much more of that awareness in their homes. And because it's going to be more dialogue and more awareness in regards to that. I think part of that as we continue to see that shift, it's really about the exposure, creating examples and people that look like them to help them understand their world. And it also understanding the different careers, because sometimes when they think STEM, they have to be a doctor, but there's much more that they can do in STEM related careers. And it's only going to continue to increase as we start to see more of that digital transformation occur.
Great, thank you. And if there's any way we can collaborate on that, we would love to talk to you about that, because we really would like to do that as well. So going to Caprice, and you are the newly elected president for the Northern Nevada Black Cultural Awareness Society. So you have a bird's eye view of the Black community here in Reno. Can you tell us a little bit about that community and some of the programs that NMB, or you call it NIP,
NEPCUS, yep.
NEPCUS, yeah. Some of the programs you have.
Yeah, so I am the newly elected president, and our mission at NEPCUS is to develop and promote Black cultural awareness throughout the Truckee Meadows. And I think within that, there are so many things that could mean. And so for me, I'm in the process of working on this strategic plan with my board members and focusing on different areas such as membership growth and sustainability, generational impact, our online presence, our community dedication, fundraising, and sponsorships. And I think that because NEPCUS has been around so long, I think that it's very important for us to continue to reestablish and to define what our purpose is here in the Northern Nevada community. And I think that with everything going on in the world right now, with the police brutality and the injustices being done to the Black community, this is the time where you see a lot of businesses and corporations and organizations trying to highlight on talking about the significance of diversity. But for NEPCUS, this is our everyday lives, and we are trying to advocate and to continue to sustain positive growth and impacts within the Black community here in the Northern Nevada area, whether that's from our mentoring moments and making sure that we are interacting with some of our younger generations, getting them involved, helping them find their voice, and knowing that they can be leaders in any avenue of life, or if it's continuing to promote our Dr. MLK Jr. holiday dinner. I think it's important that people see NEPCUS as an organization that's going to promote events and initiatives and programming throughout the year, so that we are not continuing to allow people to think that the Black community can only be celebrated in February, or that Dr. King can only be talked about on his designated day. It's important that we are highlighting local Black figures, national and historical Black figures, and not allowing the Black community to be minimized to one person or to 28 or maybe 29 days again in 4 years. It's important that these conversations are continuing to be had, even if the media isn't highlighting the issues that are being done to the communities in various areas of the United States.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And I think your organization can also help us understand some of the things that we should have been taught in school, but not, like Juneteenth. Like, how many Americans have heard Juneteenth? I have to admit, I haven't, because it wasn't taught in school. And we really need to be aware of those really historical significance. And I think your organization can be great at that. And the other question I have for you is that you are part of the Center for Student Engagement at UNR. Can you tell us some of the challenges that Black students face on campus, and how we as a community can help these Black students to develop career opportunities, especially relating to technology and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think Joe definitely touched on this a little bit, is bridging that gap between a student's education and their professional goals and aspirations. And I think that as an institution, it's important that we are not just getting our students, and specifically our Black students, to graduation, knowing how low our retention rates are for Black students, and especially our Black males, but it's important that we are showing that we are investing in their future as well. I know, speaking on personal experiences, when I was younger, both of my parents being UNR graduates and my mother being a 2-time UNR alum, it was important for me to see that they saw Black people within the community, not just their peers who are also students, but also professionals. And so I think that's something that we need to get back to here within the community and on campus, is allowing our Black students to see Black professionals in the Reno area. Because for some of them, if they're coming from Las Vegas or from the Bay Area, it's going to be a culture shock for them. And so if they do stay to graduation, we need to figure out how are we going to allow the skills and the educational tools that we've instilled in them in the classroom, and they're going to go back out into the community and make an impact that's going to benefit the university and the rest of the population here in Northern Nevada. So it's about making that connection to getting those internships early, making sure that they are exposed to Black professionals in their field, because as you see who's on this panel, we do have a diverse array of Black professionals here in Reno. So it's important that they understand that as you guys are talking about STEM or STEAM, that there are professionals in those areas, in those arenas that they can look up to for that internship. But it's also going to be a mentorship that those students may not have known that they needed, that's going to help guide them and sustain them throughout their education and their professional careers.
Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, you know, this is a question to any of the panel members. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you in the workplace? And how do we actually take that movement, if you want to call it a movement, into our business community and make a positive impact?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So for me, what Black Lives Matter means in the workplace, first and foremost, is diversity and inclusion. And it has to start at the top, you know, because right in the boardroom, you know, right at the boardroom level, we should have at least 50% of boardroom seats occupied by minorities, be it Black, brown, yellow, et cetera. So that's where it should stop. That's where it should start, where right at the very top and then work its way down. There are too many C-level positions that are not occupied by people of color. And when you have a situation like that, you have a mentality all the way at the top of a company that trickles down throughout the rest of the organization, where people just don't understand each other and there's just no diversity of thought. And that even has an impact on how ads are run to represent certain companies and how you're connecting with the marketplace. I mean, people don't understand that African Americans have a GDP. We spend more than $1.1 trillion on an annual basis. There's money in the community, but companies still are not advertising and reaching out to that market the right way. And that is due to the lack of diversity all the way at the top. The other thing is how Black Lives Matter can be, how do you incorporate that into the local community? I have one answer for that, and it's intolerance. There should be absolute and complete, unapologetic intolerance for all of the racial issues that we see today, be it police brutality or discrimination in the workplace or not paying women equal pay, you know, relative to men. There should be complete intolerance for that. So we don't necessarily, I know some people are uncomfortable with, you know, protest and marching in the streets. But the reason that's happening is because those people, those of us that are choosing to do that, are choosing to be completely and to be intolerant to the racial inequities that we see taking place. So intolerance is one thing. You don't have to be a Black-owned company to be intolerant. You don't have to be a Black-owned company to take a stand. And definitely the bigger companies need to have diversity and inclusion all the way at the top so that it trickles down.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, Desmond Tutu in South Africa said once that if you're not against injustice, then you're for injustice.
Absolutely.
And also you raised a few really good points, and that is leadership by women and people of color at the very top. And I think it's natural for us to surround ourselves that look just like us. And so there have been arguments made that if you were to start a company, start an organization, start a group, start with a diverse group, because it will organically build into a diverse group. Because if you start with a very non-diverse group, and then trying to diversify later, it becomes much more difficult. It is an ongoing struggle. Even if you just look at women in the boardroom, it's not anywhere near what the representation needs to be. So really appreciate your comments. Any other panelists?
I'd like to just address how I perceive going forward after seeing the unrest over George Floyd's death. It concerned me greatly as a Black woman, as a Black mother of 2 young males, that I personally felt like I needed to do something to express my discontent and everything that was going on. And I think whether it's a large gesture or a small gesture, as long as you take responsibility in stepping out in some way to express to your community the outrage and your feeling on the situation. It's better than sitting back watching the news and saying, oh, that's terrible, that's too bad. What I did on one of my properties is I had a shipping container painted. And the paint container, I made sure that the artist was a woman, because that was important to me, to make sure that that women are getting work out there. And I did 6 flowers, all different types of flowers. And each flower was very large, and in the petals, it had a message. Black lives matter, brown lives matter, Asian lives matter, LGBTQ lives matter, Native lives matter, and all lives matter, because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter, and all injustices are squashed. So at the very top of the shipping container, it says, we must lead with love. And that's my personal belief. And that one gesture have brought so many people to my property and my, in my community, just to see it, just to take it in. Sometimes it's not how you protest, but as long as it's sincere and directed. So that's just my take on it.
Well, thank you. And then also, whether we choose to protest or not, a lot of what we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that iceberg is a huge structural issues that we have to deal with. And we don't necessarily have to be adversarial in order to deal with some of those structural issues, but we have to recognize them. And so really thank you for that. Caprice, you are really among the young population, I would say. And so what are the young populations like yourself, people in their 20s and maybe 30s, and what does Black Lives Matter mean to you, and especially in the workplace?
I think that, I guess I have to go at it at a 2-pronged answer. In the workplace, for me, it means, I would say 2 things. It means acknowledging what's going on in society, because not saying something is saying something. I think that there's a battle that I deal with as a professional, is that as I work at an institution, a higher education institution, where my job is to serve my students, I also need it to be recognized that I have to be served, especially as a Black woman. There are many disparities that I face on a day-to-day basis. And so in light of me trying to make sure that my students are going to be prepared to be engaged, I have to make sure that I feel safe on campus. I feel safe advocating for my students. And then also, I would say that it means that Black Lives Matter is not just this movement about these injustices. There are a lot of times where you see businesses highlighting that we stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, but are you highlighting the positive things happening within the Black communities? Are you acknowledging when you have a Black professional in your workplace that has gotten a recognition, or are you acknowledging the fact that they are going above and beyond in their job? Are you highlighting Black entrepreneurs or things happening within society? Because as a Black person, personally, if all I see is an organization or my job talking about, let's talk about solidarity, but you're not acknowledging the positive things happening, it almost feels like you are limiting my Blackness to the things being done to my community instead of the positive things coming out of my community. And so it's important that we acknowledge those injustices, but that we also acknowledge the current positive things happening and the historical significances that the Black community has promoted. And I think for young people, I would say for my generation, right now is the time where we're finding our voices. And so right now is the time that we are okay with our generation being different from our parents and our grandparents, and saying, these are the issues that we're dealing with right now, and we have to learn how to handle them in this day and time, and understand what worked in the past and what we can take, what we can learn from, and what we need to alter. Because just because certain things have been done years ago or last year or last month doesn't mean that it's still going to work right now. And so it's understanding that we're constantly changing as human beings, and that the way that we need to handle some of these situations is constantly changing as well.
Great, thank you. So, we've been talking about, I think, Caprice, actually, you're the one that mentioned about intergenerational impact, and Maisha, you're talking about access to capital. So one of the things that we all know is that we need to create opportunities for Black businesses that can actually survive and potentially pass on to their children, to create that intergenerational wealth. How do we help the Black community do that so that there will be family legacy and wealth creation across generations?
That's I think that's a complicated answer. And it's interesting because I think Black entrepreneurship is approached different ways. Being involved here recently with the creation of a new ecosystem in angel investing, that's something that's not valued in that form, right? So people, investors are typically looking for business owners that are ready to start a business and sell that business within 5 to 10 years with really high margins. And so a lot of times we find that Black business owners, don't participate in those forums for the reason that you just mentioned, is that we're trying to create generational wealth because we haven't had it historically, and we need to see that in order to ensure that future generations are taken care of. So part of what you're saying, yes, I agree that a lot of Black business owners do default to a more generational system, but some of us aren't, and some of us are trying to turn profits and reinvest and find new ways of doing business. I think keeping the modes of developing economic wealth needs to remain open, because some of the traditional ways we've done that hasn't worked for us. And I'm not saying that's all on us, that there's absolutely systemic barriers in place that haven't allowed us to succeed. But I do think we need to consider doing things differently. I would also say, Grace, that we work with a lot of larger corporations to develop diversity programming. And what I've seen in that is that I think it's been mentioned a couple times previously on this panel, people are used to using the systems and the people that they already know and they're used to. So part of the diversification of our boards and of our business communities is so important, because I feel that a lot of the barriers to entry come from the fact that we're just not at the table. There aren't people thinking of us automatically. And creating that system where we can see more of us represented at higher levels so that that community increases is a key way of increasing our economic capacity over time. So it's working the system from where it is now to see those longer term results. Sometimes it's not so simple as access to capital, because a short-term loan to make payroll isn't going to change the systemic issue that we're not being considered for larger opportunities. So I don't know if that answers the question, or if you want me to expand on anything that I've said there, but I think it's a much larger question than one simple answer could.
Yeah, and thank you. And you're right. We can probably spend hours just on that. And venture, if you get venture capital, you have to have an exit, you have to sell your business and actually make someone else a lot of money. But entrepreneur can also, if they had a successful exit, invest in their own future company and build a company on their own and bootstrap. So it is a complicated issue. And I was wondering if any of the other panelists would like to chime in. And John, you're an entrepreneur. What do you think about that? Did you take capital from someone else?
No, I didn't. I bootstrapped. I like the way that you asked the question. Can you repeat it one more time, please? That way I can respond on point.
So how do we really empower Black business owners to really be successful and create that intergenerational wealth? Passing on your businesses to your children and grandchildren, and have wealth creation both within the family as well within the community, create family legacy.
Right. So there are three things we can do. We can invest Black, we can spend Black, and then we can make sure that we're circulating wealth in the Black community the right way. In terms of investment, like Maisha said, oftentimes we're not at the table. And so because of that, we're not even receiving that infusion of capital or even the chance to even pitch. There are many incubators where the incubators themselves are drawing from Ivy League schools, but the Ivy League schools are only admitting so many Black people. And so if you're not at that school, you're not graduating from that school, you're not incubating. If you're not incubating, you're not getting capital. And therefore, if you're not getting capital, there are less businesses. And the importance of having Black-owned businesses, the reason that's important is because Black-owned companies tend to hire within the communities in which they come from. And that will help close that wealth gap. So investing in Black-owned companies is important. There's a new minority-owned stock exchange that's launching next year. It's called the Dream Exchange. And they are focused on allowing Black-owned companies to get listed on a publicly traded exchange. And that's going to open up a huge influx of capital coming into the Black business community. So investing is one thing. The other thing is spending your money within the Black community. You know, we have this, I call it a marketing holiday, Black Friday, every year. And we can make Black Friday every Friday, you know, or at least monthly. You can go online and find different Black business directories where you can find different Black businesses to support. Some of you might know the story, Black Wall Street, and that takes me to my third point, which is actually circulating money in the Black community. The super quick narrative for Black Wall Street is that back in 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you had 35 square blocks and over 300 Black-owned companies. And the dollar was circulating within the Black community more than 27 times before it left. Today it leaves in less than 6 hours. So to the extent in which we're circulating the dollar, we have stronger Black businesses and we have more jobs within the community. We are launching a search engine. We're about 6 weeks away from unrolling a search engine where that search engine has Google caliber search results, but Black-owned companies are highlighted within the engine and they have the option to rise to the top when their business is relevant. And so it's vehicles like that will drive more revenue into Black-owned companies, which helps the community overall and close that wealth gap. Right now, white Americans represent 72% of the population, but they own 79% of the businesses.
Yeah.
You know, whereas, oh, go ahead.
So I was gonna say thank you. We need to make sure that your search engine is gonna bring up Pam's business and Maisha's business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you raised a very important point. In fact, recently I was reading a study and on this wealth circulation you're talking about. So apparently they did a study across different ethnic groups. Money circulate within Asians for on average 30 days. It circulate within the Jewish community on average 20 days. Latinos around 6 days. And in the Black community it's 6 hours. So the Blacks are spending money outside of their community that don't, including companies that don't even necessarily support them or hire Black employees. So there's an argument out there about how do you keep the wealth within the Black community so that there's that circulation of wealth within your community. Again, it's not a 5-minute conversation, but how we as a community can support you so that you can have more wealth circulation within your own community.
Right, absolutely. We have to do it ourselves in terms of making a bigger, more conscious effort to circulate the dollar within our community. And at the same time, allyship is very important, you know, where you take one group that's privileged and they are using some of that privilege to help an underserved group. So I always like to say, you know, you can't, when you look back over history, the last 100 years, even the last 200 years, I mean, I could walk through all the race riots and different movements that took place throughout those times. The movements that have had the biggest shift, like right now, we've seen George Floyd protest at a global level, which means there's a global shift in consciousness taking place for the first time in modern human history. That's a very powerful thing. And so you cannot make change if you're meeting change at the same level of consciousness. Meaning if there's a problem with white or anti-Black discrimination, you can't meet it with like a Black only group. You have to rise above that with a higher level of consciousness where Black, white, and everything in the middle, we are all working together, and that's allyship. And that's one of the reasons we're actually creating the search engine so that everyone can participate and help, lift each other up.
Okay, that's great. We have a few minutes left, and I would like to address some of the participants' question. And so we have one. In 1865, Blacks owned less than 0.05% of the wealth in the U.S. In 1995, that's more than a century later, Blacks own 1% of the wealth in the U.S. How do we change this? And how do we think about doing things differently?
I'll speak and say I think it's about the education. And I know Joe alluded to this point earlier, is it also starts at home. We have to get families involved. These conversations can be had once children are out of the home and on their own, whether they're going to college or they're moving out. These conversations need to be instilled in families, and that brings the point back to that generational impact. And there's a lot of times where our Black communities don't have the knowledge as much as others do, because their understanding may be limited to what they were taught in classrooms. And so then that curriculum isn't diverse, right? So we're talking about undoing years and years of limited knowledge that's being produced and trying to re-educate ourselves and each other on those historical disparities and those racial disparities. And so I think it's understanding and knowing simple things like, how do you start your own business? How do you establish an LLC or a sole proprietorship? It's understanding those little steps, because it's very much doable. I've seen so much within this time of quarantine during the coronavirus of how many small Black-owned businesses have been started out of their homes and have been able to prosper. But it's those people that don't have that knowledge and understanding of what it takes to even take that first step, let alone the access to those funds and the money. So we also have to look at getting rid of those, or understanding the racial disparities within loans and applying for loans and getting approved for those loans, and getting people to invest in those businesses as well.
Okay, great. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I'm sorry, there are a lot of questions, and obviously we need to have this conversation again. There are just, I think, a lot of hunger to want to learn and wanted to listen to what are some of the pressing issues, and so we'll think about maybe having this ongoing conversation. But just in the last couple of minutes, I'd like to ask each of the panelists maybe just say a last few words, what you have in mind. In particular, how do we keep this conversation going? So we bring the right voices to the table, diverse voices to the table. How do we get people in the leadership position, so a position of power and leadership, and keep this conversation going? So it's not just an ebb and flow. We talk about it today and it goes back into the back burner and business as usual.
Hey, this is Joe. I'll go. I think one of the ways to do it, I think, is for everyone to feel like they have a part in this process. A lot of people wait to see what someone else is going to do, or think that their voice or their action may not matter. And I think that's where we get into some of these obstacles. And I think just knowing that your voice, your perspective, your point of view is important. And I think the more we stay engaged, the more people can get involved, and really understanding all the different nuances that we need to bring to the table, particularly in our communities, the Black community. We're not a monolith, so all our needs are different. And so I think it's really about putting your voice in the room and being a part of that change and understanding how we work through some of these obstacles and barriers.
Okay. Aisha or Pam?
Sure. I have three takeaways. Getting involved, just going off of what Joe just mentioned, there's open postings in the state for open boards and commissions. Having people of color start applying for those and being responsive to those and having a voice at the table is a great way to start getting connected at a leadership role that often funnels into other leadership roles. Second is to get involved in the legislative process. it really does make a difference if somebody shows or doesn't show on particular issues. So even just being a voice in the room to testify, there's ways to get involved that change things systemically. We don't always get invited, so sometimes we need to invite ourselves, and that's one of those places that we always have a seat, and we should take advantage of that. And the third thing I have is to just take responsibility. I think especially people of color, we often doubt ourselves if we are deserving to be in the room, if we have the proper credentials, if people are going to listen to us and respect what we have to say. And the answer is yes. Through my experience in growth over the last several years as a business owner, people do listen. We deserve to be there. And sometimes you just have to take responsibility for something and just know that your voice will count if you make it heard. So those are my three.
Great, thank you. And Pam?
I was just going to say, you know, the most important thing that I've taken away is, you know, everybody has a voice, everybody has an opinion. Don't be afraid to use it. I see so many people sit back and say, you know what, I don't want to get involved. I'm too busy. It's not going to matter anyway. It all matters. If you can express yourself with your family, you can express yourself as a business owner. Your words are important, and how they're used is important. So I think as we step out as representatives in our respective communities and businesses, it's really important that we are seen and heard. I am so proud of this panel of young people today, and I'm very excited for everything that you have shared today, because you really have been very insightful.
Thank you, Pam. And Capri?
Yeah, I would just say I encourage everybody to educate themselves. It's important to do your research and to have a better understanding on these topics, as this is the optimal time to learn something new. Now is always a good time to learn something. Also, I encourage everyone not just to think about diversity within culture, but within age as well. And also in the professional realm, understand that sometimes as Black people, we're not just professionals, but we also have so many other things that we can bring to the table. And so our role in a position should not be just limited to the title, but what else we have to offer that can optimize the reach for that organization.
Great, thank you. And John?
I guess my last comment or takeaway is, first, thank you again for having me and for all the panelists that have participated. This has been very exciting and even challenging to stuff a lot in 1 hour. I think one of the ways we keep the conversation going as Black people is we educate ourselves first and foremost in terms of our own history and where we've come from. And then that way we can educate others, and that keeps this conversation moving forward. And if you're not Black, same thing, take an interest in understanding a different culture. I think what has happened in the last few months is that, you know, we've all been on quarantine and some people have been laid off, not people of color have been laid off, and folks got to sitting around starting to feel, you know, Black a little bit, and looking at the news and looking at George Floyd, and it sparked this global movement because people were finally paying attention and listening and learning about a different culture. And African Americans, we often buy into this narrative that our history somehow started here in America a couple of 100 years ago, when in reality, African history is the origin of human history. And African history is the first civilization amongst all civilizations, and everything has trickled down from that. And so to the extent that we learn that about ourselves and we can educate others, I think that will help keep this conversation going forward.
Great. Well, thank you. I wanted to thank all the panel members for sharing your personal experience and your insight. And I hope we continue this kind of conversation both in our own organizations as well as our community. And together as a community, we can build a diverse and inclusive entrepreneurial community we can, by choice, intentionally empower Black business owners and be intentional about the program that we create to help cultivate entrepreneurial mindset among Black youths so that they have the opportunity to opt in and not be left out. So again, thank you all the panelists and for all of you who joined us this afternoon. I just want to make a quick announcement about our next forum. It will be on September 2nd on startup financing. And we will have an excellent panel that talk about capital resources for underserved entrepreneur. Audacity Fund will be on the panel, and also capital resources from community development programs, as well as revenue-based financing. And these are actually all revenue that potentially you can raise capital without losing equity, and opportunity for that international, that intergenerational wealth creation that we talked about. So hopefully I'll see many of you again on September 2nd. If you'd like to be on our mailing list or newsletter, send me an email. We'll add you to our event announcement. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
You're welcome.